Every good action series must abide by the fundamentals of the side characters and antagonists, because even if a character is strong, what good is strength that isn't challenged in a meaningful and interesting way? And today, we're going to look into one of Alan Becker's stick figures that I think displays a great relationship between character backstory and character fighting style. Today, we're breaking down Purple, the resident schemer with a mended past and the master of aerial elevation and combat. Purple, as a character, differs from Green and Blue because his storytelling is progressive, and it shows in the little details in his combat characterization. But today, we're going to be talking about how he fights, which is very interesting because Purple is one of the main characters in the series that wasn't created to fight. Unlike the Second Coming, or Orange, that had a history of power dynamics in the past, or Green, Blue, Yellow, and Red for being created exclusively for a fighting game. And that's where I think it all gets interesting. So welcome to How Strong is Purple, the third part of the series where I cover the tactics, attitudes, and movesets in combat of the characters in Alan Becker's stick figure series, as well as salient character themes that amplify or explain why he does what he does. Disclaimer: this isn't your average power scaling style of video where I'm taking in strength and isolation, and I also won't be putting numbers for the sake of proving superiority against characters. It's a dissection, where I'm using the scenes and the context of their personality to better understand why they fight a certain way. Also, it's not completely power that I'm after either. It's appreciating what that character can do and which aspect of their story is best reflected in their combat arsenal. So, let's begin. Purple from Alan Becker's stick figure series was first introduced in the episode The Nether. He's the first stick that we meet that doesn't come from the sister series, Animation vs. Animator. He was intriguing back then because he introduced us to the possibility of sticks existing beyond the confines of Alan Becker's computer or web browser. Of course, we already had that idea, with what RGBY not being created by Alan, but more so that this stick doesn't have a defined home. Purple was also a character that sparked intrigue because he interacted with Minecraft the same way that other sticks did. And also because the village was set in a MacBook rather than a PC. I also find it cool, albeit probably accidental, that the color organizer tag doesn't have green and blue even though the Mac default makes it a point to have them. Purple's characterization starts off as a haughty leader that mildly learns the importance of gratitude before going back on his word and betraying Green and Blue. That is, until he pays dearly for his crimes and is sent away. Season 3 and Animation vs. League of Legends become pivotal parts of Purple's character, showing us his more cunning and conniving side, but also a side that was broken by terrible pasts and dysfunctional relationships. We get to see more fight scenes with him, especially against other sticks. So, how strong is he? Let's start with combat physicality. Purple's fighting style is a twofold system. He's a brawl-centric fighter that has a good mix of acrobatic and athletic capabilities, but he mostly focuses on punching combinations, unlike other characters that are equally proficient in switching between punching or kicking. Purple mainly uses kicks for disengaging, like when he shoves Red off of him and when he kicks Green off in parkour. Purple's kicks are also a twofold process rather than a single strike. He kicks with a primary leg, then closes the distance between himself and his enemies. Then he uses that lunge to pull himself forward and step on them as a platform with the other leg. But there are times that Purple uses the kicks offensively, such as when he knees Red's stomach or when he kicks Red in the neck. He doesn't charge, however, with kicks the same way Green and Yellow do. Instead, he focuses on upper body punches and throws. His speed and flight are meant to complement his style of punching people in the face. He shoves Red's foot off of him, he is able to counter-grab Orange mid-drop and drag him across Blue's garden, and he throws Orange off of him when he catches him. Purple is a master at reducing an enemy's combo upkeep, usually by catching them. Combo upkeep is how many hits and blocks you can do in a sequence without getting discombobulated, and Purple does his best to disengage from a situation by delivering big blows in a short amount of time. However, he himself doesn't maintain combo upkeep, prioritizing quality of hits rather than quantity of hits. So think about it like this. If Green's a fighter that interrupts combo upkeep because he throws the force back at you, Purple's a fighter that interrupts combos by breaking you down. He won't give you an inch of reaction time because his punches try to do as much damage as possible in a short amount of time. This is how he was trained to fight at a young age. He's force on force, but that strength comes in bursts rather than consistency. If you notice, his offensive contact time with Red and Orange is relatively short, and significantly shorter than when the other sticks spar with each other. Purple fights like he's in a boxing ring, and I really like that fighting style because it's so raw, and he focuses almost exclusively on the face, jaw, head, and joints. Purple is also really good at adapting to effects or movements that require body movement changes, like extra powers. This means that when Purple is subjected to an effect that requires a physical mastery of how your body moves, Purple is quick to adapt. A smaller example of this is his Elytra. He masters the concept of flying really quickly and doesn't show signs of struggling with it. But on a larger scale, this is shown in how he chains his combo attacks in Animation vs League of Legends by expertly shifting between their abilities. In this fight, he uses Lux's laser beam to shoot Orange down, then he immediately swaps to Thresh's hook to close the distance and step on Orange. You know, Purple really likes stepping on people. Then, when Orange slams down back first, Purple shocks them with Blitz's shockwave, which sends Orange flying. He suffers an attack point blank to the face. Then Purple uses Brand's Ring of Fire to blow Orange up before he can even land, delivering a final Lee Sin kick straight into his ass, which sends him flying. Purple shares a very similar trait to Green's fighting style, and it's weaponizing elevation and terrain. Purple is almost always depicted climbing onto higher grounds whenever he's in a combative state, such as when he almost declares war on Green and Blue, or when he uses the Elytra to fly away. Heights are generally a character theme of his throughout the story, wanting to achieve higher levels of success to prove his worth to someone that didn't see it. In combat though, his Elytra enables the other sticks to get to better heights, and he's seen supporting them by carrying or catching them. The Elytra helps them cover longer distances without having to sacrifice their own stamina. He also uses flight in the speed run by using a bamboo paper glider as a substitute. Purple's flight unlocks a new territory of movement for himself where it's hard to damage him unless you want to sacrifice your own balance. Purple's flight also means that he can attack at angles that are least expected, like grabbing someone in the back of the neck. This level of mobility forces enemies to grab onto him if they want to damage him, risking getting thrown off. Conversely, Purple loses against enemies with good aerial control or have the ability to throw him off of his trajectory. However, one crucial point about Purple is that he doesn't have the same resilience as stick figures that are created exclusively for combat. It's important to note that Purple's past, with what little we can garner, doesn't have the same concept of fighting rooted in his creation. This is vital. In the Alan Becker stick figure universe, a creator's intention of making a stick figure bleeds into their general abilities, personality, and arbitrary power levels. This is also the case with Purple and the Color Gang. The Color Gang are decided from the very beginning to be fighter sticks, and it not only bleeds in how naturally proficient they are in training themselves, but also how they adapt to environments that overwhelm them numerically or physically. Contrast this with Purple, who was meant to have a loving family and was only trained to be that way because of his father. I find this important because it's a very good world-building element, and it sets the precedence of power when characterizing stick figures. Resilience in combat, in Purple's case, has two core differences from the others: stagger and stamina. Starting with stagger, or the proclivity to being staggered. Being staggered in a combat context is defined as losing your balance, knocked off, or stumbling. This is vital because fast-paced combats rely on removing minute openings that can be weaponized against you. Fighters like Green, for example, weaponize the smallest openings in an enemy's attacks, relying on micro-movements to break stances and punish enemies who have slower reaction times. Being prone to getting staggered also means that you have slower recovery times. Say I knock you over with a pan, how long will it take for you to get up from that vulnerable position? The question for stagger is how well can you react to opposing forces? Purple has a hard time maintaining stances or chain attacks when an opponent is on the offensive, and he has a hard time executing prolonged counterattacks. One example of this is against Red and Orange. When Red starts his initiative, Purple constantly stumbles backward when Red is on the offensive. He tries to catch Red's movements and punch him back, but Red's kicks are far too fast that Purple's windups are interrupted. Additionally, his recovery time being slow against Green is what made him struggle so hard during this fight. Green was always able to capitalize on the fact that Purple's reaction time was lagging. However, Purple is acutely aware of this lacking. He adapted his fighting style to deliver short bursts of large forces before he could get staggered. You can't get staggered if the enemy themselves are already too disoriented to actually hit you. Or just don't get hit with the force in the first place by being good at dodging. Next is stamina. Stamina in combat is how consistent your movements are without you getting winded. Longer stamina means longer combos and longer contact time. We see that he tries to make direct combos as short as possible, and if he has the option to self-preserve, he will. We also see him do a full combo in the king and start breathing heavily. This is actually what made me go back to all of his fight scenes. Purple has the shortest combo upkeep time compared to the other sticks. He engages, then disengages much more frequently compared to the others instead of opting for sustained combat. Even when he's a load-in speedrun, most of his tactics rely on him alleviating the bodily stress from him. I want to emphasize this point not because I think Purple is weak, but I think Purple provides an interesting counter perspective to the cast. Compared to the others, he almost feels the most natural. He gets tired, he's much more practical with his resources, and he has open weaknesses. When other characters can get ragdolled much faster or have nearly godlike resistance to damage, it's such a breath of fresh air to see a character who has to rely on disengage tactics as well. When you're fighting someone, knowing when not to engage and to preserve your energy is as crucial as knowing when to exert it. This is why I think Purple is a resourceful fighter even though he has been overpowered by the others before. And that brings me to his general intelligence, which I think is the best part of his combat characterization. For a character that has such a front-heavy, in-your-face, die-already style of brutish fighting, he's also connivingly elusive. He's a tactician that can weaponize the psychological hooks of a person. In parkour, it was their want for competition, and in the prank, it was Green lowering his guard after making it seem like everything was fine. Even in speedrun, he doesn't rely on actually harming the dragon, but making it go away with a fake replica. Purple can also hack other systems in his favor, like how he hacked their League of Legends game. When he has a goal, he sticks to it without wasting time dilly-dallying on others. He tries to fly away instead of directly engaging with green, he doesn't prolong combat with orange and red if he doesn't have to, and he goes straight for the punch to King Orange to get the staff. But where I think Purple's character shines the most is the significance of fighting in his life. And this is where I go back to the other part of this fighting style analysis. Combat mentality is what I define as how the character thinks during the different phases of combat. And this is where the crux of their character's storytelling is. How do they think during combat, and what are the personal inhibitors or activators in their personality that change their fighting style? However, Purple's analysis requires a bit more character scrutiny compared to the other sticks, particularly because he went through a massive change while the others were relatively comfortable with how they engaged and approached fights. Let's start with combat engagement. Purple's upbringing contextualizes a lot of what he sees as combat. He's simultaneously someone that gets agitated or stressed when things aren't going to plan, and he results to confrontation when he can't think of a way to scheme his way out, but he also panics and avoids combat. He doesn't inherently avoid combat out of pacifism, but he avoids it out of practicality. And it's when his goals and personal achievements are challenged that he takes on a direct approach, sometimes blinded by pure ambition or spite. Considering his nature as a stick figure who has lived and been with other sticks in the other world, he also wasn't surprised or shocked about blue and green's existence. He's just kind of passive and mildly confused of why are you people in my house? We are aware that the Minecraft game is at least advertised in Stick City, so Purple probably already had the idea that if he could, someone else could as well. It was only when green and blue started unknowingly gaining the favor of the people that Purple started getting aggressive. And his first verdict was to throw them into prison. He doesn't lose that quality even after his reformation. Purple participates in their for fun contests like the speedrun challenge, or in how he enables Red's antics by actively suggesting a complete plan to prank Green rather than talking Red down. Purple, however, is what I define as a very ego-based engager. He fights the most brutally when not only the most confident, but most assertive. But the converse of that is also true. When Purple is put in positions of hesitation, he becomes evasive and attempts to disengage himself from the situation rather than full-on confronting it. This was the case when he loses or is in a lesser position of control in the conversation. Green's assertiveness during both times where Purple's confronted are great examples of this. Purple avoids confrontation when he feels physically and emotionally threatened or lost, often manifesting in how he runs away. In a way, this duality is a manifestation of his past transgressions that never truly went away. However, he also adopts a double-down mentality that complements this hesitation well. This proclivity is known as the escalation of commitment. According to Kelly and Milkman, Escalation of commitment is a risk whenever a decision maker commits resources to a course of action, which is an investment. Whether there is resistance or a failure to do that investment, they double their efforts and possibly take an even worse or more damaging route without weighing the alternatives. This is usually done because of self-justification, risk aversion, or confirmation bias. This is also the case when he almost goes for a drastic approach with blue and green and when he sacrifices them in the end, and when he doubles down against orange by eating all of the champion data. Conversely, this behavior of all or nothing is also what explains why he suddenly turned around to stop orange. He commands the Baron Nashor to try and stop the pursuit even though he was this close to winning. At this point, it wasn't the matter of victory, this was a matter of ego. How could you possibly let someone backdoor you like that in a game? And unfortunately a reality of playing League of Legends in low elo. People stop pushing just because one guy started entering the base even though they can end. Okay, this hits way too close to home. He also doubles down on his commitment to the king after he gets betrayed and dumped for nothing even though the king promised that they would rule together. And this is also the case when he ultimately decides to sacrifice himself against King Orange during the final stand. Purple has an attitude of going to the next extreme for his goals, usually fueled by emotional catalysts, either success or sacrifice. This kind of attitude to combat is beautifully contested by Green, who shows him that taking on two complete extremes to your actions and defining them by polarizing opposites isn't healthy. And slowly but surely, Purple is having fun with the extremities of combat, and he's slowly seeing them as a pastime rather than a direct approach. Now we move on to Purple's frame-by-frame analysis. Purple's frame-by-frame is going to be different compared to Green and Blue's because his fights are shorter, and unlike the other sticks, he doesn't have a lot to choose from. The core distinction about Purple's fights are that they're emotionally driven, so the actions of the other people around him, especially in Season 3, are as important as his own. Green notices Purple trying to pull out a firework, which causes him to engage. Purple dodges the first grab, but Green immediately pivots and drags Purple down by the leg. Purple is slammed onto the wall and dragged down as Green pushes his entire force into Purple and beats him in the face. Purple, however, focuses on disengaging from Green by targeting how imbalanced Green is as Purple shoves Green's foot off of the platform. As Green tries to get his footing, Purple kicks him in the stomach and he tries to fly off. Purple tries to propel himself off of the same wall and he's able to dodge Green's hook with a front flip, but Green power runs on the wall to try and match Purple's elevation. Purple is given no time to think as Green jumps to him and he punches him in the face. Purple can't catch himself fast enough as Green grabs him by the foot and Purple struggles. Purple is dragged all the way and slammed down. Purple tries to fight back, but Green catches up to him. He gives an unstable strike that Green shoves off immediately, as Purple high blocks Green's punch and he gracefully dodges Green's back kick. Purple flies to the far wall, which lets him dodge Green's forearm strike, but Green has no lag time as he shoots a fishing rod to Purple and he capitalizes on that small millisecond of Purple trying to get his footing. That's more than enough as Green reels himself to the other wall. Purple doesn't recover fast enough as Green grabs him by the neck with the arm, and Purple is flipped backwards. As Purple struggles to stand up, Green's already done charging his pommel and he's too fast for Purple to react to. Green's stability lets him combo the next punches, and Purple can't counterattack as Green punches him thrice in the face and once in the jaw, before he's punched in the stomach and bashed in the nape. This is where the fight ends. I want to use this scene to showcase the difference in technical skill between both of them, because even though Purple wasn't necessarily trying to go on a head-on fight, it doesn't discount the disparity, and the devil is always in the details. Green's transition time is seamless between the moments where he is dodged or parried, and because Purple doesn't capitalize those windows fast enough, Purple is almost always on the reactive. Conversely, Green is able to abuse Purple's staggered openings by overwhelming him with continuous barrages. This goes back to my first point about Purple having a low resistance to opposing offensive forces, which usually force him to be on the initiative or on the disengage. And I want to hone the idea that this is what makes fights complex. While the usual bloodbath or for fun fights can scratch the power itch every now and then, seeing fumbles and disparities are equally important in this kind of series, because the beauty of Alan Becker's stick figures is that it respects the boundaries of power. Not all characters that are depicted as OP are always guaranteed to win, and not all powerful abilities are free. Not all fighters play by the same rules either, with some either being faster, stronger, or smarter. Purple's fights are compelling not only because he's a formidable fighter with potential, and even if he struggles, he does his best to win. This complements his story really well and how he had to constantly climb up to get to that arbitrarily reinforced perception of strength. And this is what I want the How Strong Is series to emphasize, not just for Purple, but also for the other characters. It's not just how strong are you, it's what does that strength mean to you. Anyway, I'm Mushi, and this has been How Strong Is Purple.